In the field of psychology, Machiavellianism is a personality trait centered on manipulativeness, callousness, and indifference to morality, with high levels of self-interest. The term is derived from a 16th century Italian philosopher named Niccolò di Bernardo Machiavelli and his most famous work, The Prince. In the underworld of the American Mafia, there have been some mafiosos who embody this personality trait. To them, the ends always justify the means. They are Machiavellian Mobsters, and these are their stories. Number 20. Joseph, Skinny Joey, Merlino. Joseph Salvatore Skinny Joey Merlino was born on March 13, 1962, in Philadelphia to Italian-American parents Salvatore Chucky Merlino and Rita Giordano. His father, Chucky Merlino, was a mob associate in the Philadelphia mob at the time of Joey's birth. Merlino was raised in South Philadelphia and later Ventnor City, New Jersey. While in Philadelphia, Joey would attend St. Thomas Aquinas Grade School in Philadelphia's Breeze Point neighborhood with future made men in the Philadelphia crime family, Mikey Chang Cingolini, and his brother, Joseph Joey Chang Cingolini Jr. His father was close to made man Nicky Scarfo and would become made himself in 1980 by then boss Philip Testa. By the time Joey was 20, the man he thought of as an uncle, Nicky Scarfo, was the boss of the Philadelphia mob, with his father being Scarfo's underboss. Merlino's father owned and operated the 9M bar in Southwark that would serve as his headquarters, as well as Scarfo's base of operations when the boss was in Philly. His uncle, Lawrence Yogi Merlino, was also a made man in the Philly mob and would eventually become a capo under Scarfo. As he grew into adulthood, Joey was described by one-time capo and underboss Phil Leonetti as a fresh kid, cocky, and always in trouble. In August 1982, at the age of 20, Merlino and Salvatore Scafidi, son of bookmaker Gaetano Scafidi Sr., beat and stabbed two male patrons at the Lido's restaurant in Atlantic City. In August 1984, he was banned by the New Jersey Casino Control Commission from all New Jersey casinos. Later that year, Merlino was found guilty on 2 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of possession of a weapon for unlawful purposes. His father, Chucky, would also be banned by the same commission as his son. Nicky Scarfo would demote Joey's father, Chucky, from his position as underboss to soldier because of his father's alcoholism, promoting his nephew, Phil Leonetti, to the position of underboss. With his father on the outs with the family boss, the younger Merlino would begin building a crew that would be his power base in the years to come. His boyhood friends, Michael Cingolini, Stephen Mazzone, George Borghese, Gaetano Tommy Horsehead Scafidi, and Martin Angelina would make up a crew that would one day rival Salvi Testa's Young Executioners crew a decade prior. During those early years, Joseph Merlino had been described as a particularly vicious person, obsessed with his own public image. Joey was a party guy, said mob associate Ron Previte, a police officer turned gangster turned government witness. He liked to go out, he liked to gamble, he liked the high life. He was a fixture at the city's nightclubs and restaurants, as well as sporting events. Along with his longtime buddies and future mobsters, he was known to beat up people, rob people, and start fights in clubs. Meanwhile, in the late 1980s, Nicky Scarfo Sr. would be convicted and sentenced on multiple counts to 55 years in state prison. On October 31, 1989, his son, Nicky Jr., was shot in an Italian restaurant in Bella Vista. The younger Scarfo was shot 8 times with a MAC-10, but was not hit in any vital organs. He quickly recovered and left the hospital less than 2 weeks later. No one was ever charged with the attempted murder, but the Federal Bureau of Investigation and local law enforcement believe Merlino carried out the shooting to settle the score between the Scarfos and the Merlinos and to show that the elder Scarfo had no more power in Philadelphia. Merlino denied any involvement and claimed he was at home under house arrest the night of the shooting. In August 1989, Merlino was charged with interstate theft and conspiracy charges stemming from an incident where $352,000 was stolen from a federal armored express truck in 1987. In January 1990, Merlino was convicted of planning the heist and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Merlino would serve his sentence at Pennsylvania's McKean Correctional Institution. There, Merlino met Ralph Natali, a long-standing Philadelphia mob associate, currently serving a 16-year sentence. In the young, charismatic Merlino, Natali, who was nearing 60, recognized the golden opportunity, and the pair started plotting to take over the Philadelphia family from incumbent boss John Stanfa. With Scarfo imprisoned and out of the picture, John Stanfa, a longtime Philadelphia mobster, had received the blessing of the New York Mafia Commission to head the family. Merlino and the new wave of South Philly mobsters, dubbed the Young Turks by the media, believed Stanfa had no place on the Philadelphia throne and that they could do better. According to Natale, a longtime mobster who served a 15-year sentence for arson and drug trafficking, he and Merlino began taking over the Philadelphia crime family during this period. Natale named Michael Cingolini, Stephen Manzone, George Borghese, Gaetano, Tommy Horsehead Scafaldi, and Martin Angelina as Merlino's key associates and co-conspirators in the plan. These men were all close friends of Merlino since high school and started moving on in the criminal rackets in Philadelphia. When John Stanfa emerged as the new leader of the Philadelphia family in 1991, the young group of mobsters openly rebelled against him. The Young Turks, as the press would eventually dub Merlino's tight-knit crew, struck first with the killing of Felix Boccicchio on January 29, 1992. Merlino was released from prison in April of that year. In an attempt to quell further violence, Stanfa officially inducted Merlino and his best friend, Michael Cingolini, into the crime family. Stanfa hoped that he would be able to keep tabs on the Merlino crew and make it easier to kill them if necessary. While this act of diplomacy temporarily ended the violence, by 1993, an all-out war had broken out between Stanfa and Merlino. On August 5, 1993, Merlino survived a drive-by shooting assassination attempt by 2 Stanfa gunmen, taking 4 bullets in the leg and the buttocks, while Cingolini was shot in the chest and died. On August 31, 1993, a drive-by shooting was performed on Stanfa and his son while they were driving on the Schuylkill Expressway. Stanfa escaped uninjured, and his son survived after being wounded in the jaw. On September 17, 1993, a friend of Merlino's was shot and killed by Stanfa gunmen. Stanfa hitman Philip Coletti testified in court that he planted a remote-control bomb under Merlino's car several times, but that it failed to go off every time. In November 1993, Merlino was arrested by the FBI and charged with violation of his supervised release. He would be sent back to prison. Stanfa would later be arrested under RICO Act violations in March of 1994. He would be convicted in 1995 and sentenced to life in prison in 1996. With most of Stanfa's supporters also arrested or convicted, Merlino, who was released from prison in November of 94, won the war and named Ralph Natali as the new boss while positioning himself as the underboss. During Natali's reign, Merlino was the real power in the family, allowing Natali to become boss to direct law enforcement attention away from himself. Nevertheless, Merlino gained notoriety as a flamboyant celebrity gangster who often went out partying with a large entourage. The press dubbed him the John Gotti of Passyunk Avenue due to his candid demeanor in front of news cameras. He also invited the press when he held Christmas parties for the homeless and gave away turkeys at Thanksgiving in the housing projects. The arrogance and aggressiveness of Merlino's young faction turned off a lot of criminals from working with the crime family. Merlino would often make big bets with bookies and refuse to pay when he lost. This practice, known as guzzling, was used on both independent and mob-run bookies. During this time, Merlino and Natali oversaw the crime family's gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and stolen goods rackets. In 1995, Louis Tura, leader of the Philadelphia drug ring dubbed the 10th and Oregon Crew, also known as the 10th and O Gang, was severely beaten by Merlino's men allegedly for failing to pay a mafia street tax on the gang's illegal earnings. Angered by the beating, Turra sought vengeance. It is alleged that Turra's father Anthony hosted a meeting at his house, during which Anthony, Louis, and the gang discussed killing Merlino. In January of 1998, Louis Turra apparently hanged himself in a New York City jail cell while awaiting trial. In March of 1998, Anthony Turra, who was on trial for plotting to kill Merlino, was shot dead outside his home by a gunman in a black ski mask. He was shot twice as he left for the federal courthouse. We consider this an organized crime assassination, a mob hit, Police Inspector Gerald Kane said. 3 years later, Merlino was put on trial for helping orchestrate the murder. However, Merlino was acquitted. By the late 1990s, Merlino dodged more than 24 attempts on his life. Merlino was friends with Steve Gorilla Mondevirgin, president of the Pagans Motorcycle Club. Merlino sometimes used the Pagans to settle underworld disputes. During the 1990s, Merlino was also aligned with members of the Junior Black Mafia. Following Natali's arrest for parole violation in 1999, Merlino officially took over the crime family, cutting off Natali. Then on June 28, 1999, Merlino was indicted and detained without bail on one charge of conspiracy to distribute more than 5 kilograms of cocaine and one charge of unlawful use of a communication facility in relation to drug trafficking offenses. The charges were later expanded to include racketeering and ordering or approving 3 murders and 2 attempted murders. 6 other men were also put on trial. The prosecution's case was aided by several of Merlino's former mafia cohorts agreeing to cooperate with the government. Natali agreed to cooperate in order to escape drug trafficking charges in 1999. Gaetano Tommy Horsehead Scafidi agreed to cooperate in 2000 while finishing a prison sentence due to fears that he would be murdered by Merlino's crew. Peter the Crumb Caprio agreed to cooperate with the government in 2000 after being charged with 2 murders. Ron Previte testified after becoming an undercover informant several years prior. They all testified that Natali and Merlino started a mob war to take over the Philadelphia crime family and that Merlino committed various criminal acts in the 1990s. On July 20, 2001, the jury returned a mixed verdict. Merlino was acquitted of all 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. However, he was found guilty of racketeering charges, including extortion, bookmaking, and receiving stolen property. Along with Merlino, 6 of his peers were also convicted of various racketeering-related charges. On December 3, 2001, Judge Herbert J. Hutton gave Merlino a 14-year prison sentence. Commenting on his conviction, Merlino said, "It ain't bad, better than the death penalty." A month after the verdict, Merlino was indicted in federal court again for the 1996 murder of Joseph Sodano, despite a jury finding the murder charge not proven as a RICO predicate act. In March 2004, Merlino was acquitted of Sodano's murder as a violent crime in aid of racketeering. Merlino served his prison sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute, Indiana. Merlino was released from the correctional facility on March 15, 2011, after serving almost 12 years of his sentence. He was transferred to a halfway house in Florida for 6 months, and then was on supervised release until 2015. On January 4, 2015, just before his parole restrictions expired, Judge Richard Barclay Surik gave Merlino a 4-month prison sentence for violating his supervised release by meeting with organized crime figures in Florida. On April 24, 2015, Merlino was released from the Federal Detention Center in Miami after his sentence was vacated. He was released 10 days early and was free of any post-release restrictions after he won an appeal from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. In a 2013 interview with George Anastasia, Merlino denied any current involvement in the Philadelphia Mafia and has stated that his life as a criminal is over. He was quoted in the interview as stating, "I want no part of that," and that there were too many rats. On August 4, 2016, Merlino was one of 46 people arrested up and down the East Coast in a RICO indictment. Merlino was arrested at his home in Florida and put on trial in New York City. Merlino was charged with 1 count of racketeering, 1 count of fraud, and 2 counts of illegal gambling. Merlino was accused of entering into illegal business arrangements with New York criminals in the Genovese crime family. The other 45 men charged in the broad indictment accepted favorable plea bargains and pled guilty to reduced charges. Merlino refused any plea offer and went to trial on January 30, 2018. The trial concluded after 2 weeks of testimony. On February 20th, Judge Richard J. Sullivan declared a mistrial after the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict on any of the 4 counts against Merlino. To avoid a retrial, Merlino entered into a plea deal with federal prosecutors on April 27th. He agreed to plead to 1 count of facilitating illegal gambling transactions via an electronic device in exchange for the U.S. Attorney's Office dropping the remaining charges against him and recommending a prison sentence between 10 and 16 months. On October 17th, Merlino was sentenced to the maximum of 2 years in prison. In October 2019, Merlino was granted an early release and moved to a halfway house to finish the rest of his sentence. He was later given supervised release in South Florida, where he has since led purportedly a legitimate and philanthropic lifestyle. He would even be photographed with former President Donald Trump. However, Merlino will be remembered not as a philanthropist, but as a Machiavellian mobster. His revenge against the Scarfo clan, his betrayal of John Stanfa, and his puppeteering of Ralph Natali earned him a spot as one of the most treacherous mobsters of his generation.